Autumn 1882. The sky hung pale and dry over the remote trading post. Wind pushed dust in circles around the stock pin where the boards had darkened with old blood. A dozen men leaned on rails watching, their faces hard beneath sweat-stained hats. Some spat tobacco, others clinked coins in calloused hands. All waited with the hungry patience of wolves. In the center of the yard stood a woman chained between two iron posts. Taller than most of the men watching, she wore a deerskin dress torn during transport. The front gaped across her chest while a high tear exposed one powerful thigh. A red X had been burned into her left shoulder, the skin still angry and blistered. Despite her bonds, she held herself with unbroken dignity, shoulders squared, spine straight, eyes fixed on the distant mountains. She did not beg. She did not lower her head. Thomas Morgan stood in the shadow of the mercantile porch, studying the scene. 42 years had weathered his face into a map of hard country and harder decisions. His cavalry days showed in his posture, but the haunted look in his eyes spoke of battlefields best forgotten. He wore faded trail clothes, green shirt, black neckerchief, worn suspenders, dark trousers tucked into scuffed cavalry boots. The Winchester 73 resting against the post beside him had killed men across 3 territories. The Colt Army Model 1860 on his hip carried 5 rounds with an empty chamber beneath the hammer. The way men who intended to keep breathing carried in Apache country. "Too big to breed," the auctioneer called, standing on a wooden crate with practiced authority. "Apache giantess, marked for meat, not claimed by any tribe or authority." He gestured toward the woman's powerful frame. "Sold as is to recover transport costs." Men laughed, but their eyes held something darker. Thomas had seen that look before. At Shiloh, when soldiers stripped valuables from the enemy dead. In mining camps when claim jumpers were strung up without trial. That look meant someone had stopped being human in others' eyes. The butcher stepped forward, measuring tape in hand, already calculating cuts. "How much for just the hindquarters?" he called, drawing more laughter. Thomas felt the weight of decision pressed down on him. He'd promised himself after the war, after the fields of dying boys calling for mothers who would never hear them, that he would never again look away when the line between order and cruelty grew thin. He knew her, or at least knew of her. Maya, daughter of Chief Black Wolf of the Warm Springs Apache. He'd fought alongside her father during the Comanche campaigns of '75. Black Wolf had saved his life at Eagle Pass, taking an arrow meant for Thomas. They'd shared blood and fire, and the silent understanding of warriors. Now his daughter stood in chains, branded like cattle. The woman's eyes suddenly locked with his. In them, Thomas saw not fear, but calculation. She was counting exits, measuring distances, planning her next move even while bound. Despite her chains, she was still a warrior. "No bids?" the auctioneer called. "Then we settle this with knives." He motioned to the butcher. Thomas pushed off from the post and strode forward. Not rushed, not hesitant. The crowd parted slightly, a few men recognizing his bearing from wanted posters across 3 territories. "Federal custody order," Thomas announced, voice carrying the hard authority that had once commanded cavalry charges. He pulled a folded document from inside his vest. "This woman is listed under protective custody, daughter of Chief Black Wolf of the Warm Springs Apache, allied to the U.S. Cavalry during the Comanche Wars." The auctioneer's smile faltered. "We got papers of sale, mister." "You've got nothing that'll stand before Colonel Barrett at Fort Apache," Thomas countered, mentioning the fort commander by name. "I'm taking her under Section 12 of the Apache Treaty. Any objections can be filed with the Indian Agency." A whisper rippled through the crowd. "That's Morgan, Tennessee ghost." The auctioneer's eyes widened slightly. Even the butcher stepped back, suddenly finding interest in his boots. Thomas hadn't fired a shot, but his reputation carried weight in a territory where men's lives often ended at the wrong end of a gun. 15 years as cavalry scout, 7 as territorial marshal, 18 confirmed kills during the Apache campaigns, and those were just the ones officially recorded. "She's been sold fair," called a tall man emerging from the trading post. Marcus Blackwell, slave trader and gun runner. His fine suit contrasted sharply with the dust-coated crowd. "I paid good money to transport her after she killed 3 of my men." Thomas met Blackwell's gaze steadily. "You're operating outside treaty territory, Blackwell. Take it up with the Indian agent at Fort Apache." Blackwell's hand drifted toward the ivory-handled revolver at his hip. The crowd tensed, sensing blood. Thomas didn't move for his own weapon. Instead, he spoke in a voice pitched to carry. "Draw that gun, and I'll return you to your maker. There are 12 witnesses here who'll testify I acted in self-defense." The certainty in his voice, not bravado, but simple fact, made Blackwell hesitate. His hand hovered near his holster, fingers twitching as he calculated odds. Thomas waited, perfectly still save for the slow, measured rise and fall of his chest. His eyes never left Blackwell's, reading the man's intentions in subtle shifts of expression. Blackwell's hand dropped away from his gun. "This ain't over, Ghost." "It is for today," Thomas replied. He moved to the post, never turning his back on the crowd. With practiced efficiency, he unhooked the heavy chain and wrapped it around his arm. He didn't look at Maya, but spoke firmly. "Walk." She moved with the fluid grace of a mountain cat, despite her shackles. Together they crossed the yard, passing through the parting crowd. Not a word was spoken, not a move made. Only when they reached Thomas's horses did he holster his weapon. "Water in the canteen," he said, nodding toward the saddlebags. "Drink slow." She studied him with dark, unfathomable eyes before taking the offered water. She drank methodically, controlled, never breaking her stare. When done, she handed back the canteen without a word. Thomas used his knife to cut the rawhide binding her wrists, careful not to touch her skin. The moment her hands were free, she rubbed the raw circles where the bindings had cut deep. "We ride west," Thomas said, 8 miles to shelter before dark. As he prepared to mount, he noticed Blackwell speaking with 3 riders at the edge of the trading post. Money changed hands. Maps were consulted. Thomas recognized the type. Manhunters. Bounty already placed. The chase would begin before they made camp. Maya followed his gaze, then looked back at him, one eyebrow raised in silent question. "Yes," Thomas answered, understanding perfectly. "Trouble's coming." He handed her a spare shirt from his pack, too small for her frame, but better than the torn dress. She slipped it on with dignity, then mounted the second horse with surprising ease for someone who'd been in chains. As they rode away from the trading post, Thomas felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders. Behind them, dust already rose from riders preparing to follow. Ahead lay rough country, hostile settlers, in the shadow of a promise made years ago to a dying Apache chief. The hunt had begun. They rode hard through the afternoon, the horses' hooves throwing dust that hung like copper mist in the fading light. Thomas kept to the rocky draws where tracks would be difficult to follow, changing direction at stream crossings, doubling back along ridge lines. Maya rode with the easy confidence of someone born to the saddle, her tall frame balanced perfectly, reading the terrain with hunter's eyes. After 3 hours, Thomas reined in beneath a sandstone overhang that provided shelter from both elements and watching eyes. The sun had dipped behind the western mountains, painting the clouds bloody against the darkening sky. "We'll rest the horses," he said, dismounting. "Can't outrun them forever." Maya slid from her mount and immediately surveyed their surroundings, noting escape routes, defensive positions. She moved with deliberate economy, conserving energy. The burn mark on her shoulder had started bleeding again, the X stark against her copper skin. "Let me see that," Thomas said, gesturing to her wound. She tensed, eyes narrowing. "Infection will kill you faster than Blackwell," he added, his voice matter-of-fact. After a moment's consideration, she nodded once and sat on a flat rock, pulling the shirt aside to expose the burn. Thomas retrieved a small kit from his saddlebags. The wound was deep, the skin blistered and torn where the brand had been applied multiple times to ensure the mark took. As he cleaned it with whiskey and a strip of clean cloth, Maya didn't flinch, though the pain must have been considerable. Instead, she studied his face with the intensity of someone memorizing an enemy or sizing up a potential ally. "Why?" she asked, her voice rough from disuse but clear. The single word carried layers of question. Thomas met her gaze. "Your father saved my life at Eagle Pass. Took a Comanche arrow meant for me." He paused, then added what he hadn't told anyone in years. "But that's not why I stepped in back there. I've seen too many good people die because others looked away." "I'm done looking away." Recognition flickered in Maya's eyes. "You're the ghost," she said, the English words careful but precise. "The one who returns from death." Thomas nodded, applying a salve of beaver fat mixed with herbs to her burn. "Some call me that. Thomas Morgan to most. Major Morgan once. But that was long ago. My father spoke of you. Said you fought with honor." Her eyes remained wary. "But white man's honor changes like the wind." Thomas finished dressing her wound in silence, then stepped back to give her space. "Your father was a good man," he finally said. "Better than most I've known, regardless of color." He gestured toward the horizon. "Those men back there, they're hunting you because you know something. Something about Blackwell's operation." Maya's expression hardened. "I know many things. I know he trades guns to Comanche. I know he sells young Apache girls to mining camps. I know he works with a white-eye chief who wears a silver star." Thomas's jaw tightened. Corruption among Indian agents was common, but an official actively working with slavers was dangerous information, the kind people got killed for knowing. "That's why they didn't just kill you," he said. "They needed to know who you told." A humorless smile crossed Maya's face. "I told no one. My sister and I were taken when raiders hit our hunting party. 3 men tried to—" She didn't finish. "I killed them with their own knife. Blackwell said a woman who kills like a man is too dangerous to sell, but too valuable to waste. So they marked me for meat." Her hand unconsciously touched the burn. "My sister is still with them. Ella, 15 summers." Thomas checked his ammunition, counting rounds methodically. 40 for the Winchester, 30 for the Colt. Not enough for a prolonged fight. "We'll head for Fort Apache at first light," he said. "There's a lieutenant there I trust. Cooper. Fought with him at Gettysburg. He'll help us mount a proper rescue." Maya's eyes flashed. "My sister does not have until first light. We can't take on Blackwell's entire operation, just the 2 of us," Thomas replied. "Not without getting ourselves killed." A distant gunshot echoed across the canyon, followed by the frightened call of a nightbird taking flight. "They're closer than I thought," Thomas muttered, grabbing the Winchester. "Get the horses into the rocks." As Maya led the animals deeper into the shelter of the overhang, Thomas crawled to the edge of their position. Through his brass spyglass, he spotted 5 riders moving along their trail, led by a tracker in a red bandana. Even at this distance, Thomas recognized him. Charlie Reed, half-Comanche manhunter known for bringing in bounties more dead than alive. 5 men, he reported quietly as Maya returned. "Reed's leading them. He'll find us by moonrise." Maya retrieved a knife Thomas had left in his saddlebag. The blade caught the fading sunlight as she tested its edge. "Then we will make sure they regret finding us." Thomas studied the approaching riders, calculating angles and distances. The narrow canyon offered limited approaches. With proper positioning, They could ambush the pursuers, even the odds. "There's a spot up canyon," he said, pointing to a narrow gap between two boulders. "Natural funnel. They'll have to come through single file." Maya nodded, understanding immediately. "You take position there. I will move along the high ridge to come behind them." She pointed to a nearly invisible game trail that snaked up the canyon wall. "I hunted mountain lions in country like this since I was a child." Thomas frowned. "That's a deadly climb in the dark." She fixed him with a level stare. "IMD, daughter of Black Wolf. I have tracked mountain lions across stone. These men are nothing." She tied her hair back with a strip of leather. "Unless you think a woman cannot fight?" Despite the gravity of their situation, Thomas felt a grudging smile tug at his mouth. "Your father was just as stubborn." "My father," she replied, "learned from my mother." Thomas watched as Maya disappeared into the darkness, moving up the game trail with the silent efficiency of a lifelong hunter. Her tall figure blended perfectly with the rocky terrain, becoming invisible within moments. Thomas positioned himself in the rocks above the narrow passage, Winchester braced against a boulder, Colt ready at his side. 20 minutes passed in tense silence. Thomas controlled his breathing the way he'd been taught by an old Cherokee scout during the war. Inhale for 4 heartbeats, hold for 4, release for 4, the rhythm of a stalking wolf. A single gunshot cracked through the darkness, followed by a scream of pain and panicked shouts. Thomas tensed, finger hovering near the trigger. More shots, scattered, firing wildly. The hunters were being hunted. From his vantage point, Thomas saw a shadow move along the ridge, Maya, circling like a hawk. She'd struck once and disappeared, sowing confusion among their pursuers. A classic Apache tactic, one that had frustrated the U.S. cavalry for decades. 4 riders burst into view, spurring their mounts frantically toward the canyon passage. Reed led them, his face twisted in anger and fear. As they reached the narrowest point, Thomas leveled the Winchester. "That's far enough," he called, voice echoing off the canyon walls. The riders pulled up sharply, weapons half drawn. Reed's eyes widened in recognition. "Morgan," he spat, "should have known you'd be mixed up in this." Thomas kept the rifle steady. "Turn around, Reed. Ride back to Blackwell. Tell him the woman's under my protection." Reed laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. "You don't know what you're involved in, Ghost. This goes higher than Blackwell. The Apache woman saw something she shouldn't have at Blackwell's camp. Governor himself has an interest." "Governor Parker?" Thomas asked, surprise momentarily breaking his concentration. Reed's smile turned vicious. "Why'd you think we're so determined? This ain't about one Apache woman. This is about 20,000 acres of treaty land with silver deposits that would make a man king. Your Apache friend and her sister witnessed a meeting that can't become public knowledge." A cold feeling settled in Thomas's stomach. Governor Parker had been pushing to redraw treaty boundaries for months, claiming Apache raids justified military response. If he was working with Blackwell to create false attacks. "So that's the game," Thomas said. "Stage raids on settlements. Blame the Apache. Use public outrage to force new treaties." "Smart, man," Reed nodded. "Too smart to live now." His hand dropped to his holster as he barked to his men. "Take him." Thomas fired, the rifle's report thunderous in the confined space. His bullet caught the man to Reed's right in the chest, dropping him instantly. Reed's revolver cleared leather as the others scattered for cover. From the ridgeline above, Maya struck. She'd scaled higher than either side expected, positioning herself directly over the manhunters. Thomas watched as she launched herself from the rocks, landing on the rearmost rider like a mountain lion taking a deer. Her knife flashed once in the moonlight. The man never screamed. Thomas worked the Winchester's lever, firing and reloading in the fluid motion of a veteran. His second shot took another rider in the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle. Reed and the remaining man returned fire, bullets whining off the rocks around Thomas. Maya moved again, a shadow among shadows, materializing behind the wounded rider as he struggled to his feet. One strike, precise and terrible. Then she was gone again. Reed fired wildly toward the ridge, panic replacing his earlier confidence. "She's behind us!" he screamed. "Circle up!" The distraction was all Thomas needed. He leveled the Winchester and put a bullet through Reed's thigh. The manhunter howled, dropping his revolver as he clutched the wound. "Surrender, Reed," Thomas called. "You're finished." The last rider bolted, spurring his horse back down the canyon. Thomas let him go, a messenger to carry fear back to Blackwell's camp. Thomas approached Reed cautiously, rifle trained on the wounded man. Blood soaked Reed's pant leg, but the bullet had missed the artery. He wouldn't die, not unless Thomas decided he should. "The map, Reed," Thomas demanded. "The one showing the silver deposits." Reed glared up at him, teeth bared in pain and hate. "Go to hell, ghost!" "You first," Maya said, materializing from the darkness behind Reed, her knife at his throat. Blood not her own stained her forearms. Her eyes were cold and determined. "Where is my sister?" Reed swallowed, feeling the knife's edge against his skin. "Canyon del Oro," he gasped. "Blackwell's main camp. But you'll never get to her. 30 men guard that place." Maya pressed the knife harder, drawing a thin line of blood. "The map!" "Saddlebag," Reed choked. "Left side." Thomas retrieved the folded map while Maya kept Reed immobile. The parchment showed Apache territory with red circles marking silver deposits. Blue lines indicated proposed new boundaries after the relocation. Governor Parker's signature authorized removal of hostiles by any means necessary. "This is it," Thomas said, showing Maya the map. "Proof of the conspiracy." She studied it, then looked toward the east. "Dawn comes soon. Fort Apache is 2 days' ride. My sister does not have 2 days." Thomas reloaded the Winchester, decision already made. Where exactly in Canyon del Oro would they keep prisoners? "Red Door Building," Reed muttered, his fight gone, as blood continued to seep from his wound. "North side of camp." Thomas bound Reed's wound, not from kindness, but to ensure the man lived to face justice. Then he secured him to a boulder with his own handcuffs. "The army will find you," Thomas told him. "Maybe wolves will find you first. Depends on how your luck runs." As they rode out, the first light of dawn broke over the eastern mountains, painting the landscape in golden shadow. Behind them lay wounded men and spent cartridges. Ahead waited a slaver's camp, a captive girl, and a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of territorial government. Thomas felt the old familiar clarity of purpose that came only when the path was clear. For too many years he drifted, haunted by war memories, taking jobs that kept him moving. Now, riding beside the daughter of a man who'd once saved his life, he felt the weight of something that mattered more than survival. This was about justice, the kind that didn't bend to silver or power. Canyon del Oro lived up to its name, walls glowing like molten gold in the afternoon sun. Thomas and Maya lay prone on a ridge, overlooking Blackwell's operation. What they saw below made Thomas's jaw clench until his teeth ached. The camp sprawled across the canyon floor, a dozen permanent structures surrounded by tents and corrals. Armed men patrolled between buildings. In the central clearing stood a post where 3 Apache women were chained, awaiting transport or sale. Among them, a slender girl with frightened eyes and Maya's distinctive high cheekbones. Ella. 27 men, Thomas counted, studying the camp through his spyglass. 12 buildings. Main house has Blackwell's flag. He passed the glass to Maya. "See the man in the black coat? That's Sheriff Rawlins from Silver Creek. Supposed to be enforcing the law, not breaking it." Maya scanned the encampment with the practiced eye of a hunter. "Ella is alive. Unharmed. Relief flashed briefly across her face before hardening into resolve. The building with red door, that is where they take women before selling them. Thomas marked positions on a rough diagram scratched in the dirt. Too many for a frontal assault. We need a distraction. He pointed to the far side of camp. Ammunition store there, beside the corral. One well-placed shot could create enough chaos for us to reach the prisoners. Maya shook her head. Guards will kill captives first if attacked. They have orders. Thomas considered their options, limited and poor. 2 against 27, with hostages at risk. The odds were worse than Antietam, and he still carried scars from that bloodbath. We need help, he admitted. Maya's expression remained impassive. There is no help. Thomas adjusted his position, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounded side. Fort Apache is a day's ride east. Lieutenant Cooper has 30 men under his command. With the map we took from Reed, we have proof of the conspiracy. My sister will be gone by then, Maya replied, her voice tight. Tonight they move the women. I heard the guards speak of it at the trading post. Before Thomas could respond, movement below caught his attention. A stagecoach approached the camp, flying the territorial governor's flag. As it rolled to a stop, armed men formed an honor guard. From the coach stepped Governor Parker himself, immaculate in a tailored suit despite the frontier conditions. Parker, Thomas whispered, here personally. They watched as Blackwell emerged from the main house to greet the governor with exaggerated deference. The two men spoke briefly before disappearing inside with Sheriff Rollins. The snake comes to collect his poison, Maya said grimly. Thomas's mind raced. The governor's presence complicated matters, but also presented an opportunity. If they could capture Parker with evidence of his crimes, no amount of political influence could save him. Change of plans, Thomas said. We wait for nightfall, then we take the governor. As darkness settled over Canyon del Oro, they made final preparations. Using charcoal from their small fire, Maya darkened her face and Thomas's for night movement. They divided the ammunition, checked weapons, synchronized their pocket watches. If anything happens to me, Thomas said, passing her the map and documents, get these to Lieutenant Cooper at Fort Apache. He's a good man. He'll help you and your sister. Maya secured the papers inside her clothing, then placed a hand briefly on Thomas's shoulder, the first voluntary contact she'd initiated. My father was right about you, she said simply. Thomas nodded once, unable to find appropriate words. Instead, he checked his Colt one final time, ensuring all 6 chambers were loaded. Tonight, he'd forgo the empty chamber under the hammer. Tonight would require every bullet. They split up at the canyon's edge, Maya circling toward the rear of the camp, while Thomas approached from the eastern slope. The plan was simple in concept, near impossible in execution. Maya would free the captives while Thomas created a distraction. Then they'd converge on the main house to capture Parker. Thomas slipped between the sentry's patrol routes with the practiced silence that had earned him his ghostly nickname. He reached his first objective, the ammunition store, without incident. Placing small charges of black powder from his saddlebags at strategic points, he set slow-burning fuses before melting back into the shadows. The explosions came 5 minutes later, perfectly timed. The ammunition store erupted in a cascade of fire and flying metal. Men shouted in confusion, abandoning posts to battle the spreading flames. In the chaos, Thomas spotted Maya's tall figure, moving swiftly toward the captives. He turned his attention to the main house, where light still burned despite the commotion. Drawing both pistols, he approached the building from behind, locating a partially open window where voices drifted out into the night. The Apache problem will be resolved within the month, Governor Parker was saying, his cultured voice unmistakable. Once the silver rights are secured, you'll receive your agreed percentage, Blackwell. And the military? Blackwell asked. General Harrison is cooperative, Parker replied. especially after I showed him the profitability projections. The Apache will be relocated or eliminated. Either way, the land is ours. Thomas positioned himself beneath the window, counting voices to determine how many men occupied the room. At least 4, possibly 5. Bad odds, but he'd faced worse. A sudden commotion from the captives area drew shouts of alarm. Maya had been spotted. Gunfire erupted, followed by the distinctive sound of Apache war cries, Maya creating her own distraction. Thomas seized the moment, crashing through the window with both pistols drawn. Inside, Governor Parker, Blackwell, Sheriff Rollins, and 2 guards froze in shocked tableau around a table covered with maps and contracts. "Nobody move," Thomas ordered, weapons steady despite his racing heart. Recognition dawned in Parker's eyes. "Major Morgan? What is the meaning of this outrage?" "The meaning is treason, Governor," Thomas replied, "conspiring with slavers, orchestrating false raids, violating federal treaties. I have the map with your signature. I have witnesses." Blackwell's hand inched toward a derringer on the table. Thomas locked eyes with him, a silent warning. The slaver's hand stilled, but his eyes burned with hatred. "The next one who moves dies," Thomas stated flatly. Outside, the gunfire intensified. Maya was outnumbered, fighting a desperate holding action. Thomas needed to end this quickly. "Sheriff, remove your gun belt," he ordered. "Governor, you're coming with me to Fort Apache to answer for your crimes." Parker's aristocratic features contorted with rage. "You fool! Do you think anyone will believe the word of a washed-up soldier and an Apache savage against a territorial governor?" "They'll believe the evidence," Thomas replied. "Now move before I decide you're not worth the trouble of keeping alive." The standoff stretched, taut as a bowstring. Then Sheriff Rollins made his decision, going for his pistol with practiced speed. Thomas fired, the bullet striking center mass. As Rollins fell, the remaining guard lunged forward. Thomas's second shot dropped him, but the momentary distraction gave Parker the opening he needed. The governor seized a hidden derringer from his vest, firing at point-blank range. Thomas felt the bullet tear through his left shoulder, spinning him against the wall. Fighting through the pain, he returned fire, his shot catching Parker in the stomach. The governor collapsed, blood spreading across his fine suit. "You've killed us both, Morgan," he gasped. "Men like us, we're already ghosts." Thomas staggered to his feet, pressing a hand against his bleeding shoulder. "I'm nothing like you," he managed, securing the incriminating documents from the table. Outside, the gunfire had decreased to sporadic shots. Thomas had to reach Maya to see if she'd managed to free the captives. Pushing through the pain, he made his way to the door, only to find it blocked by Blackwell. The slaver had recovered his own pistol, aiming it despite his wounded hand. "You've destroyed everything I built," he snarled. "You built it on stolen lives," Thomas replied, his own weapon empty after the gunfight. Blackwell's finger tightened on the trigger. A shot rang out, but it was Blackwell who fell, a knife buried to the hilt in his throat. Behind him stood Maya, bloodied but upright, her eyes burning with cold satisfaction. "My father's debt is paid," she said. Thomas nodded, fighting the encroaching darkness at the edges of his vision. "The women? Free. Ella is safe." Maya stepped forward to support him as his legs threatened to buckle. "Now we must go. More men come." Together they stumbled from the burning camp, Maya half carrying Thomas despite her own injuries. They reached the horses hidden in a nearby ravine, just as reinforcements arrived from a neighboring outpost. "Fort Apache," Thomas managed through gritted teeth. "Cooper will help us." The next hours passed in a haze of pain and jarring movement. Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness as they rode through the night, Maya keeping him in the saddle through sheer determination. By dawn, infection had set in, his wound burning like fire beneath a crude bandage. They reached Fort Apache as the morning bugle sounded. Lieutenant James Cooper, Thomas's old comrade from Gettysburg, ran from the gates as Maya called for help. Soldiers swarmed around them, lifting Thomas from his horse, carrying him toward the infirmary. "The documents," Thomas gasped, clutching Cooper's arm. "Governor Parker, conspiracy with Blackwell, Apache women." "Easy, old friend," Cooper soothed. "We've got you now." "Trust him," Thomas told Maya, before darkness claimed him completely. He awoke 3 days later in the fort's infirmary, shoulder heavily bandaged but fever broken. Maya sat beside his bed, her own wounds dressed, wearing clean clothes provided by the fort. Her sister Ella dozed in a chair nearby. "You live," Maya observed when she saw him stir. "The doctor said the bullet nearly found your heart." Thomas attempted to sit up, wincing at the pain. "Cooper? The documents?" "Safe. Your friend sent riders to territorial headquarters with the evidence. The surviving women have given testimony." A rare smile touched her lips. "Your Lieutenant Cooper is a good man. He has arranged for my people to receive military escort back to our lands." Thomas relaxed slightly, relief washing through him. "And Blackwell's operation?" "Destroyed. The remaining men captured." Maya's expression turned solemn. "While you healed, much has happened. Governor Parker survived long enough to reach Santa Fe. Before dying, he implicated others in the conspiracy: judges, Indian agents, military officers." "How deep does it go?" Thomas asked. "Deep enough that Washington has sent a special investigator," came Lieutenant Cooper's voice from the doorway. He entered, uniform immaculate despite the early hour. "Senator Hollister arrived yesterday. He's particularly interested in your testimony, Thomas." Thomas absorbed this, understanding the implications. The corruption ran deeper than they'd imagined. "What about the Apache lands?" he asked. Cooper smiled. "That's the best news. The Senate has temporarily suspended all treaty renegotiations pending investigation. The lands remain protected." Maya looked toward her sleeping sister. "For now." "For now," Cooper acknowledged. "But with Parker's conspiracy exposed, the silver interest will find it harder to operate in the shadows." A week later, Thomas stood at Fort Apache's gates as Maya prepared to depart with the military escort and the freed women. Lieutenant Cooper had arranged for them to be taken safely to the Warm Springs Reservation, where their remaining people waited. The investigation into Governor Parker's conspiracy had already claimed 3 territorial judges and an Army colonel. Senator Hollister had promised reforms in the Indian Agency, though Thomas harbored no illusions about how quickly government wheels turned. Still, it was more justice than he'd expected to see. "The silver mines will still tempt white men," Thomas warned as he handed Maya a Winchester rifle, a parting gift. "Others will come after what Parker failed to take." "And they will find us ready," Maya replied, accepting the weapon with a nod of respect. She hesitated, then extended her hand in the white man's gesture of farewell. "Perhaps the ghost will visit Warm Springs someday." Thomas took her hand, feeling the strength in her grip. "Count on it." As Maya mounted her horse, Ella rode up beside her sister, sitting straight and proud despite all she had endured. The young girl studied Thomas with curious eyes. "You saved us," she said simply in careful English. "I will tell stories of the ghost who fights with honor." Thomas touched his hat in acknowledgement. "Just tell them that sometimes even ghosts can find their way back to the living." As the escort formed up, Maya raised her hand in final farewell before turning her horse toward the distant mountains that had been Apache land since before any white man set foot upon it. Lieutenant Cooper joined Thomas as the procession disappeared around a bend in the trail. "Washington's offering you a position," Cooper said. "Special investigator, reporting directly to the Indian Affairs Commission. Good pay, government authority." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Washington wants me?" "Senator Hollister was impressed by your testimony. Says we need men who know both worlds." Cooper handed him an envelope bearing the Senate seal. You'd be tasked with investigating corruption in Indian agencies across the territories, starting with the remaining Parker conspirators. Thomas felt the weight of the envelope and the responsibility it represented. For years he'd drifted, haunted by war memories, taking jobs that kept him moving. Now he was being offered a chance to make real change. I'll need an interpreter, Thomas said. Someone who knows Apache ways. Cooper smiled. I already suggested that. Senator approved a budget for you to hire whoever you need. Thomas looked toward the mountains where Maya and her people would make their home. I know just the person, he said. 1 month later, Thomas Morgan rode into the Warm Springs Apache Reservation. His badge glinted in the sunlight. Not a Marshall Star, but the Eagle of the United States Indian Commission. At his side rode Maya, now official interpreter and consultant to the commission. They were greeted by Chief Running Elk, Maya's cousin who had assumed leadership after Black Wolf's death. The tribe had heard of their exploits, how the Tennessee Ghost and the daughter of Black Wolf had brought down a governor and saved Apache lands. That night around council fires, Thomas listened as Maya translated the chief's words. The silver in our mountains will always draw the white man's greed. But now we have a ghost watching over us. A ghost with the power of your government behind him. Thomas nodded, understanding both the hope and skepticism in the chief's words. Government promises had been broken before, but this time something was different. As he looked across the fire at Maya, tall, proud, unbroken despite all she had endured, Thomas knew he had finally found his purpose after years of wandering. Not redemption for wartime sins, but something better, a chance to prevent new ones. Tell the chief, Thomas said to Maya, that as long as I breathe, the people of Warm Springs will have justice. Maya translated, then added words of her own in Apache. The chief smiled, nodding in approval. What did you add? Thomas asked later, as they walked beneath stars that seemed impossibly bright above the reservation. Maya's rare smile appeared, transforming her stern features. I told him that some ghosts keep their promises. In the distance, an eagle circled above the desert plains, free and watchful. Thomas Morgan, the Tennessee Ghost, had found his place in a hard, unforgiving land. Behind him, the mountains stood ancient and enduring, much like the people who called them home. Some debts once paid, forged bonds that could never be broken.